From my heart to yours, welcome to this session, Brains for Living. What do we mean by brains for living? I can't wait to share it with you. Just a word before we begin about this series of videos created to support the Capitol Police families. When I use the word parent, what I'm referring to is any caring adult that right now is supporting young children, adolescents, young adults, right? So you may be a grandparent, an abuela, you may be a step parent, you may be a half parent, you may be a foster parent, you may be a second mom, you may be an auntie, you may be an uncle. This is for you. So just if I use the word parent, just substitute whatever your role is in that young person's life. So what this episode is about, it's about the good stuff in our brains, even when we're under bone crushing chronic stress. There are things that we can do for ourselves and those that we love to help alleviate some of that. And it doesn't have to be some huge production. This is simple stuff to do to keep our heads in better places. So why we learn about neurotransmitters, why we, venture what neuroscientists know is because it allows you as the parent, as the adult in the group, to manipulate the kids around you. And when I use the word manipulate, I know some people think that's got a negative connotation. We manipulate our kids all the time. As long as we're doing it for good, I say you have my support. Um, what we're doing today in terms of neurotransmitters, this is what advertisers use. This is what marketers use. You know, the video games that your children are addicted to, literally, that's because the game developers know about neuroscience and use that to keep your kids engaged and addicted to gaming. So if marketers can use it, if game developers can use it, like I keep saying, it's simple stuff. I want to make sure that we, as caring adults, know how to do this, why to do this, so that we can create more comfortable spaces for those that we love. Because most importantly, neurotransmitters are what can reduce depression, what can reduce anxiety. And we'll look at that in depth in 1 second. So how we're going to do it, let's go. I'm going to talk to you. I've got some information on the slides. It will give you a holistic view of what this is and how to do it. And then in the text set, which I'm going to explain in a second, there are many more resources that whatever you decide is best for your family, there are resources in there to support you do that. So text set, what this is, it's just a document of curated resources. There's videos, there's articles, there's research, there's things I've created to be able to do what I'm sharing in this video with these slides. Underneath this video in the description box, there is a link. It says text set link, colon, and then the link is next to it. And you click on that. And then, you can save that document to your hard drive, your Google, however you save documents, and then you will have it. And please know that you can share this with whoever you think it would be beneficial for, because that's where we are right now. We really need to support one another. So happy, happy, joy, joy. Let me get out of the way a little bit. I guess I can. I guess I'm staying here. Happy, happy, joy, joy. What do we need to do? What do we need to know to be able to consciously elicit happy chemicals in ourselves, our children, and those that we love? But because this is educational, as you know, those of you who have watched the introduction of me, your developer, you know I come from the education sector. So in education, we always start with an assessment. So this is the assessment I'm going to start you off with. According to the Hot Dog and Sausage Council, how many hot dogs do Americans, just the United States, consume between Memorial Day and Labor Day? So get your best guesses in, right? Phone a friend, see what you might get, and then look at this answer. I don't know if anyone got this right. Wow. Yeah, I know what you're doing right now. You're counting 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3, right? That's 7 billion. If you were somewhere close, or just let me know in the comments what number you thought it was at first. But yeah, it's summertime. We're in between Memorial Day and Labor Day 2021. We're coming off a year and a half that has challenged all of us physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, in every way. But here we are in the summer, and we're about to consume 7 billion hot dogs. All right. So, why did I ask you that question, right? That's like we got serious stuff to do when she's talking about hot dogs. I just wanted to represent to you one of how we elicit one of the positive neurotransmitters. And this is a big one. This is dopamine. I tell everybody I know we are all dope fiends for dopamine. This is our reward chemical. You know that feeling you get when you accomplish something and you feel good. That's your body, your brain is releasing dopamine. That is our reward, our chemical of reward. Those folks who have had parents who have said, make your bed as soon as you get up in the morning and then you'll have energy for the rest of the day. That's not just an old wives' tale. As we do more things, we get more dopamine, and dopamine is our motivation. But we don't get it just from doing things. We'll look at that in a second. Anytime you are asked or you ask another, like that silly question, how many hot dogs do we consume? Whether you're wrong or right, you get a shot of dopamine. That's why Jeopardy and game shows are, you may do that as a family. You may watch Jeopardy. Know that the pleasure you're getting from that is the dopamine that's being released in your brain every time you venture to make a guess at what an answer could be. Again, dopamine is our reward. So for those of you who make to-do lists so you can check stuff off, and if we were face to face, I'd ask you why, and you would tell me because it feels good. That's right. Every time you make a check, you get a shot of dopamine. So when we're feeling it's difficult for us to motivate ourselves. We find ourselves in a really low energy place, or our children, our loved ones are in this really low energy place. Counterintuitively, what we need them to do is accomplish something. And then they'll get that little dope that maybe can get them to accomplish something else. That's why when we break big goals down into smaller pieces, like, okay, here's the outcome, but to get there, I need to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. If we give ourselves credit for every time we accomplish a step towards that big goal, we get more dopamine. And what I'd like you to notice in yourself or your children, when so moms and dads out there, you get up in the morning and you have this to do, and by, let's say, 9:15, you will have accomplished ABC. And then your children decide, no, you're not. We're going to take you, either they're fighting or they're whining or they won't get ready. whatever, and you're prevented from accomplishing what in your head you want to accomplish, you know how crabby you get, how angry you get sometimes? That's because you did not get your dope, basically. You were expecting that you would get that shot, but because you did not accomplish what you had set out to accomplish, something interrupted you from doing that. That's what the crabbiness comes from. So, yes, I know some of you are already putting this together that heroin co ops our dopamine receptors. What that means is the only time you get that feeling of satisfaction, accomplishment, that feeling that we get from dopamine, the only way we get that is when we shoot up heroin. Um, that's why it is such a hard drug to kick, because it wires itself right into one of the most important neurotransmitters in our body. All right. So in your text set, there's this infographic that's in front of you right now that shows you what to look for if someone's deficient in one of these neurotransmitters. You can look at that. And then as the guiding parent, as the supportive person, there's also what you do to elicit dopamine. Oh, and the last thing I want to say about dopamine, because you may have people like this in your life. I do. Um, there are some people who I feel don't get that shot of dope until they hear the words, "you are right." You know, those people that will argue you into the ground. They're the yeah, but people. You say something and they, yeah, but, and they have the counter. Um, those people, I feel, don't get their dopamine till they hear you're right. So this describes my brother pretty well. So when I have to see him, that's the first thing I say to him. I give him a hug. I say, "It's nice to see you," his name. And then I say, "And you know what? You're right." And I just get it over with right from the beginning. Another neurotransmitter, we're going to look at 3 neurotransmitters and 1 hormone that kind of acts like a neurotransmitter. So the second one we're looking at is endorphins. And I have a sense this is something that most of us are familiar with, right? This is the runner's high. We've heard about endorphins since we were young pups. Endorphins rise when we're in pain. That's running, right? Sometimes that can be painful, but our endorphins rise, so we're in this good feeling kind of space. They support, not only do they rise in response to pain, but they also support us in reducing our anxiety and our depression. So the good news is you don't have to run to elicit your endorphins. You can eat dark chocolate. You can laugh. And I will tell you, the average person laughs 13 times a day. So you can just start being curious about that. Are you laughing that much? Are your kids laughing that much? And if not, what do we need to do to get us to laugh more? Because it's not just endorphins. That's oxytocin, which we're going to look at in a minute again. And it's just a very healthy state when we're battling the chronic stress that we are all battling. So those are endorphins. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone, not a neurotransmitter, but it can act like a neurotransmitter in our system. So oxytocin is the chemical of trust. It's what's elicited when you engage in a relationship with another person and you start trusting them. We get it most from cuddling and hugging, which, you know, over the past year and a half, cuddling and hugging just wasn't available to us like it had been in the past. And luckily, there are other ways to elicit oxytocin. One is being outside in nature. And I don't know if you personally, but if you look around the country, during the last year and a half, people spent a whole lot more time outdoors than they had previously. And I think that just was a natural way to go out and get that oxytocin that we need to feel safe in our world, because we weren't getting as much from hugging. Um, to the moms out there, oxytocin is what contracts your uterus for birth. If you had to be pitocin, if you had to be induced for labor, the chemical they use is pitocin. It is a derivative of oxytocin. Also, any moms out there who breastfed their children, when your milk lets down, not when it comes in, but when it lets down every time the baby nurses, that narcotic feeling that would just envelop you, that's oxytocin. So think about yourselves or your kids or those you love when you sleep at night, even when it's really uncomfortably warm. If you need to sleep with some kind of little sheet or coverlet on you, know that that's for oxytocin. Blankets are not just for warmth, they are for comfort as well. And that's because even though the pressure is light, you know exactly the weight that your blankets have to be to feel comfortable enough to go to sleep. That's your level for oxytocin. If you've noticed the past year and a half, sales of weighted blankets are through the roof. Weighted blankets, thunder vests for your dogs, thunder vests for children of autism who are having a hard time calming down. That's oxytocin. Deep pressure is oxytocin. So this is going to sound counterintuitive, moms and dads, but there's sometimes when your kids are being little, I could curse right now, you know what I mean? Sometimes what they really need is a hug. And it's the last thing we want to do because we're so mad. But a principal I was working with one time, she had a toddler, a little older than a toddler. And of course, educators always think, oh my gosh, our kids have to be well behaved. We're teaching children. We should know how to handle our own. And he would just be impossible. And one day she just gave up and she gave him a hug and just held him, and he settled right down. And now that's their communication. When her son is feeling like that, he just yells out, I need a hug. And mom gives him a hug. So that's our oxytocin. Oh, here's the other thing. I always, because this is important about oxytocin too. So have you ever found yourself that you've laughed inappropriately, socially inappropriately, like in a place where you just shouldn't be laughing, and no matter what you try to do to stifle that giggle, it keeps bubbling up? Laughter elicits oxytocin. We laugh when we're nervous. It's like it's a stimulation that our body does to naturally make us feel better, feel more at ease. So if you're yelling at one of your kids and they're giggling, just know that they're not disrespecting you, they're not laughing at you. It's their reaction of their brain and their body and their nervous system. This is biology, trying to make themselves feel safer. And giggling releases oxytocin, which is trust and safety. And then finally, serotonin. These are all big. I feel like saying this is a big one. These are all big. But you can see how, through different ways, how easy they are to elicit once you're aware. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter, a brain chemical that is activated when we feel significant or important. It's activated when we express gratitude. And here's the thing about serotonin. Low levels of serotonin are correlated to depression. If you or someone you love has ever been clinically diagnosed with depression and were prescribed medication, it was a serotonin-based medication, because serotonin is what helps get us out of depression. So, and if you see on the slide, there's an asterisk next to feels good about social status. Parents of adolescents, this is for you. So when I say adolescents, anywhere between 11 and 18, okay? In that age group, peer acceptance to them biologically, is survival. It's not about what we think, oh, it's not important to be popular or not popular. Their relationships with their peers is how they learn about the complexities of social interactions. And also they're creating their bonds with their tribe, right? You're there to raise them. The preachers, their teachers, their coaches, all the adults in their life are there to support their growth, but will be gone before they get to the end of their lives, right? They will be spending most of their time with their peers, not their families. And that's why many counselors, good counselors, when they're counseling younger humans, kids, they not only see the family, they say that they see the peer group as well, because those are really big connections. So when I say they see it as survival, right? So think of when your kids were born, how ultimately dependent they were on you for years, right? They couldn't feed themselves. They couldn't dress themselves. They could not regulate the temperature in their environment by themselves, right? Their absolute survival depended upon you. That's just the trajectory of a human being. Then when a human being reaches that stage, adolescence, they really can start to almost survive on their own, right? We know in some developing countries that kids at this age are out on the street already and are surviving. When kids get to that age now, they believe their survival doesn't depend on their parents anymore. Their survival depends on their peers, because in actuality, it does, right? We know no way can you survive on your own in this world. Everything is connected. So the ability to establish those relationships is a matter of survival or not. And this is how important relationships are to your children if they're at that adolescence age, right? They also take more risks, but it's a whole nother session. We're just looking at serotonin and relieving depression and relieving anxiety. So one thing I didn't say in my introduction is I supported, in state of New Jersey, I supported the juvenile justice system for 3 years. I supported the teachers, the administrators. I went into the prisons and did demonstration lessons. So I got to know many of the prisoners who were children. And many of the young folks that were in there because of gang offenses, right? Things they had done with gangs and got in trouble for. And what the kids told me, they had all their different stories of being in gangs, joining gangs, but how they got to the gang, the stories were eerily similar, I would say, from a parental view. So what many of the young gang members told me was that they were pretty lonely. They were either bullied by classmates or not accepted or isolated, last picked up for a softball team or a kickball team, the kind of elementary school stuff that goes on still to this day, unfortunately. So they would start feeling very isolated. And I'm trying to think of what they call not the influencers. When the folks from the gangs go out to get people in. I know it's a simple word. I just don't have the word right now. I'll think of it in a minute. Um, what they would do is they would look for kids who were seemingly isolated, and they would go, the recruiters, that's what they're called, the recruiters in the gang would go up to these kids and say, um, we have a group. They're very loyal, they're very supportive, they've got your back all the time, because gang members do. They're a family, and the members are very important to one each other, and they will take a hit for one another. Um, so the isolated kid, who's in his mind, he knows he's not a gang member, right? But he starts kind of talking to this guy more, and then they give him a, what the kids in prison called, a gang light activity. He would go rob a vending machine or something like that. Nobody would get hurt. It didn't involve people, it didn't involve weapons, just a screwdriver or whatever they used to break into vending machines. um, and then at that point, right, now you have a kid who says, I'm not a gang member, but they're starting to engage in gang activity. At that point, that's when they make a decision that will either get their life back on track so they don't go down that rabbit hole, or they make a decision that says, you know what, I really like the support that these folks are giving me. And then they get more and more involved. And of course, the tasks get more dangerous and more hurtful. So during these times when we are under so much stress and we've been so isolated, and I know you've worked really hard at keeping your kids connected with their peers, right? But sometimes the external has worked against us. So just who are they hanging out with? Do they have um, good friends? Do they have peers that they have forged relationships with? They don't need to be the most popular kid on the planet, but do they have one or two good peers who support them and are in a healthy relationship with? Okay. So that's serotonin in terms of that accepted social status. But the good news is there are also other ways. Okay. That's kind of like what we want to avoid, what the red flags we want to look for. But to elicit serotonin, all we have to do is practice gratitude. I know that sounds like so hokey and so, how can something that simple pull off this huge of a feat? But the research is really, really clear. So this is just one piece. This is repeated over and over again, but I'll give you Newberg and Waldman's experiment that they did. They gave adults, you, not the kids, you guys, a satisfaction of life survey. And then what they did is they had the adults in the study just every night at the end of the day write down 3 things for which you're grateful. And I even say after a while, you don't have to write it down. You can just think it in your head, right? I'm now grateful if I get a green light. I say, thanks. Thanks. I'm glad I got a green light, right? You'll see, once you get into this habit, it just trickles into everything you do. But so they gave him this satisfaction of life survey for 1 week. Write down 3 things for which you're grateful for at the end of every day. At the end of that week, they re-administered the same satisfaction of life survey. And what they noticed is everyone's life satisfaction went up. What was amazing to me in this research is 6 months later, life satisfaction was still elevated. So how do we do this with our families? Well, if I was seeing you in person, you would be receiving a journal, a moi journal. Moi means what in French? That's right, me. Here it means mindful of I. And all we do, ourselves, our loved ones, definitely our children, we just have them begin journaling. And at the end of every day, write down 3 things for which they were grateful. Or they could even write down 3 things they did well that day, right? That's giving them serotonin and dopamine. And then you can have them, what's 2 things they're wondering about, right? And hopefully you'll be able to, you'll have a relationship with them where you can look through their journal so you can see what they're wondering about. It's just another insight into how their headspace is these days. And then, but you know how kids get bored really quickly? We get bored really quickly. So maybe on day 4 or 5, you want to mix it up. You know, if you have pets, what would your pets say they're grateful for you about? You know, you could even write, like on Thursday night, dad takes the journal and writes 3 things that they're grateful for about their kids. Again, that's that recognition, celebration that elicits serotonin, which is preventative or prehab against depression. So in your text set, there are several resources about the neurotransmitters. Again, there's an article, I think I've got a video in there. There's different ways to elicit serotonin through gratitude other than what I just suggested, because I respect you and the way you're rearing your family. I respect whatever culture you come from and how you're using those culture's tenets to raise your children. So I am not here to say, do this, do this, do this. What everything in the text set is about is, here's what research says, here's what Sharon's suggesting, but in the text set, there's other ways that may fit your family, your culture, your way of rearing children better than what I've suggested here. So your next step, moms, dads, abuelas, et al., how will you raise your own awareness of neurotransmitters on yourself? What will you notice about the weight of your blankets? What will you notice about the feeling of dopamine, of reward that you get when you accomplish something? Will you notice next time you're crabby, is it because you expected to accomplish something and you didn't, so you didn't get your dope, right? So just, you got to notice it in yourself first, that self-awareness of what's going on chemically and how it creates a happy space or not. We notice that in ourselves first. And that way we know the best ways to manipulate those that we love. But again, we're manipulating them to feel good. So that's not bad manipulation at all. So just remind yourself that I'm grateful for you because you're doing your best in a time when it's like no parent has been through what you're going through right now. And yet you're still there, providing safety, providing love, providing support to your loved ones. And right now, that's what your children need the most. I believe that you are amazing. See you next time.